After a 40-mile fixed gear ride with about 3,000 feet of elevation gain, I immediately whipped out my phone to check my stats on Strava, only to find out that my network dropped my ride about 6 miles into it. Since my ride wasn't on Strava, all of my sweating and suffering was all for naught. I used to be really into Strava, and I used to get disappointed after riding my bike if my stats didn't record, or if I felt like I really pushed myself but I didn't get the achievements to show for it. Overusing Strava can develop a mindset that's toxic for your enjoyment of cycling, and a lot of times you'd be better off just not using it. This is how Strava ruins riding. I just want to give a Fixie famous shout out to Mikey Singcox, Durella01, Evil Ernie, and Mark Vandeventer for supporting the channel through Patreon. And a lot of what I'll be talking about in this video expands on this book, Just Ride, by Grant Petersen, the founder of Rivendell Bicycle Works. Amazon link for this book is in the description, and it does support the channel. Strava is built for racers and wannabe racers, and it values quantifiable stats over the actual quality of the ride. Because of that, it's an inaccurate representation of rides. Take a look at a Strava feed and you'll find that distance and elevation gain are front and center of a ride's recording. Click on a ride and you'll find what people are really looking for: average speed. While these metrics give a good starting point to understanding what a ride was like, it's far from a complete picture, and it heavily favors the roadie style of ride above all else. Strava frames speed and distance as the most valuable metrics for how good a ride is, complete with a subculture of people riding ridiculous distances, sometimes to the point of injury, and waiting for perfect tailwinds at 3 a.m. just so you can topple your rival's KOMs. Longer rides are better, faster rides are better, more elevation is better. The better your stats, the better cyclist you are, right? Not exactly. Since those are the stats that racers and wannabe racers care about, Strava doesn't record a lot of metrics that paint a clearer picture. According to the metrics that Strava cares about, a roadie averaging 23 miles per hour in a club pace line gets a better ride in than a commuter who averages 10 miles per hour for the same time. Until you learned that the commuter was riding solo against a headwind in rush hour traffic while carrying a 30-pack of beer that weighs 22 pounds. I went on a ride last week in flat as a pancake, Sacramento, and averaged 12 miles per hour, which is pretty middling if we're being generous. As flat as Sacramento is, riding here isn't exactly a ride in the park. Although it doesn't look like it according to Strava, this ride was difficult because this day had 30-mile-per-hour winds with gusts of up to 42 miles per hour, and you better believe that they were headwinds. Strava doesn't measure whether it's raining or snowing or whether you're in a tornado. It doesn't measure whether you've had breakfast or if you're on a fixed gear. And it doesn't measure how much that basket full of corgis you're carrying weighs. Where you're going with a basket full of corgis is beyond me, but regardless of how fast or how far you ride, that is an awesome ride in my book. I know that you can get a clear comparison if rides are compared by power output, but the hundreds of dollars that power meters cost only makes sense to people who don't ride bikes but train on bikes. Even at that, splitting stats should only really matter if you're racing. Don't get me wrong, Strava is a very useful tool and I love Strava. It's fun to look back on my rides and remember bonking hard on mile 80 of my first century. Heat maps are incredibly useful for avoiding dangerous roads and unfamiliar places, and it's inspiring to see what kinds of rides everybody in the reasonably dangerous club are crushing. But like any other tool, Strava has some serious drawbacks that you should consider before using it. The danger with Strava is placing too much value on stats, especially if you're not a racer. When this happens, Strava stops being a tool that records how you ride, starts dictating how you ride. When you overuse Strava, it takes the fun out of riding and ruins it. When achieving stats takes precedent over internal motivations for riding your bike, riding becomes a chore, which is one of the worst things that you can do if you want riding a bike to be a part of your life. Instead of riding your bike because you want to unwind and have some fun, you ride your bike because you have to hit your quota of 100 miles per week. Instead of pulling over on a ride to enjoy the beautiful scenery or to talk to a friend that you run into, you say something silly like "shut up legs," as if you're going to win a trophy for averaging 18.5 miles per hour on your solo ride. Since competition is intertwined in every facet of Strava, it makes it all too easy to get lost in the stats and lose sight of why you're even riding a bike in the first place. There's a saying, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen, and some people are actually completely serious when they say this, because having a longer, faster ride than than your rivals is more important than enjoying the ride. When riding to have another Strava recording full of KOMs and medals becomes more important than enjoying the ride, it creates a toxic mindset that ruins cycling for you and, quite frankly, for other people too. This hyper-competitive mindset of achieving at all costs disqualifies other forms of riding that are just as important as those long, hard rides where you feel like throwing up at the end. Every ride becomes a race, and they're not. I've been on group rides that were supposed to be chill and to keep a tight pack together. A lot of people that come out to these mellower group rides are beginners and people just looking to have some good conversation while riding a bike, including some people in their 70s. Then one dude will bolt off to try to snag his segment back that nobody cares about, pulling a lot of the pack in the process. The group gets split up and we can't regroup because some people can't hang back and fall below 16 miles per hour. Some people that get dropped go home, and the beginners that just wanted to learn what riding is all about conclude that they're not cut out to be a cyclist. Don't get me wrong, I also love earning achievements, pushing my limits, and redefining what's possible for myself, but there's a lot more to cycling than just that. Strava cultivates a mindset where cruising around your neighborhood doesn't count, where knocking about with friends and family with no destination doesn't count, and where you can't turn onto an unexplored path because you'll lose time on your segments. Just as there's a time and place for long, hard rides, there's a time and place for chill rides. Just because Strava as a platform values difficult rides, it doesn't make them inherently better than mellower rides. I'm fully aware that I sound like a grumpy old man, but in Just Ride by Grant Petersen, a real grumpy old man, he argues not to count miles because no ride is too short. Instead, counting days is better. Just ask yourself, did I ride my bike today? And if the answer is yes, that's a good ride. So much of a ride is qualitative, whereas Strava distills rides down into quantitative metrics, overvaluing the difficult roadie-style ride in the process. Instead of counting distance and speed, it's more useful to ask yourself, am I glad that I rode my bike? Am I happier after riding my bike? What good ideas did I have on my ride? Am I glad that I rode to my destination instead of taking transit or driving? Did this bike ride help me to be a better friend or family member? How useful was this bike ride for my life? Now I'm gonna sound like a hippie for saying this, but riding is more than just achieving stats. Riding can be a meditative experience that helps you balance out your life. And Strava takes that component of riding away by placing too much emphasis on achieving goals and beating your opponents. I still do use Strava because it is fun and it is useful, but now I just use it whenever I feel like it, which is rarely, instead of having it decide how and when I should ride my bike. Riding is just a part of my life, and I don't need to record and share my rides, just like I don't need to record and share my dinner. I could approach my riding more competitively, just like I could approach my eating more competitively, but I don't want to, and neither do most people who ride a bike or eat food. Try riding your bike for 2 weeks without recording anything and decide for yourself whether you like tracking stats more or whether you like riding however you dang please. My opinion may be unpopular, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and reasoning for or against stat tracking in the comments. And if you want a simple, practical guide to bikes, check out Just Ride by Grant Petersen in the description. For more philosophy, watch this video on why you should stop upgrading your bike. But only if you've already ridden your bike today. Otherwise, stop watching me right now because life is short, but don't make it shorter, so ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous.